Yeah, sure. So I worked for a guy at LinkedIn who was a VP of BizOps. His name was Dan Yu. He's an incredible person. He's been my mentor for a long time. He wrote my recommendations for business school, recruited me to NerdWallet. And he, I think, arguably really did a lot of the definition of what BizOps is today. And there's two different types of BizOps teams. BizOps evolved a bit later in the tech life cycle, as tech was a bunch of small companies. You don't really need a bunch of MBAs running around. And I've now been companies with two different versions of BizOps. One is the dedicated BizOps model where you have a team you'll have BizOps for all the different leaders of the organization, BizOps for product, BizOps for sales, BizOps for marketing. That's Dan Yu's view of the world and what it looked like at LinkedIn and NerdWallet. And Glassdoor is similar, but slightly different. It's more of a centralized team that works on broad cross-department initiatives instead of having a BizOps partner exactly dedicated to marketing and only what the priorities are of that marketing leader or the sales leader. It becomes a bit broader and you'll have projects that really no one else can get done because they don't span all those different teams.
What are the strengths of both of those models? Just quick interjection.
Yeah, totally. I think the strengths, it's a really good question. So I think there's a lot of pretty obvious strengths to the dedicated BizOps business partner model, because then you are literally infusing really smart strategic thinking throughout the whole organization. What I always recommend, what I don't think is great, is when you do that and then have those teams actually report up through the functions. When they report up through product, they report through marketing, because then you lose that connection. What's awesome is to have the BizOps or marketing person thinking with the BizOps or product person and applying unified frameworks. So if you have a centralized team, but that's dedicated to the different parts of the business, what you end up doing is, infusing that thinking through the organization in actually a holistic way. But the downsides of that model is sometimes companies just kind of aren't big enough to bear it. If you think about the background of someone who's a BizOps or strategy person, they're someone who likely they may have an MBA, they thought about leadership, they thought about strategic thinking, they think about the path forward for any organization. Having a BizOps leader parallel with every single leader of a different business unit or a different function, it can be overkill. And so I think it's really dependent on both the company's just stage and size, and then also how the company functions. Do things really get done centrally? Is there central strategic thinking, or is it more that you want to infuse the strategic thinking, but you want to make sure that you're not overdoing it as well?
Excellent. Okay, sorry to interrupt your thought. Carry on.
Yeah. So, at LinkedIn and NerdWallet, they're both run by the same guy, by Dan Yu. And so they were much more, centralized team, but dedicated business partner model, BizOps for product, BizOps for marketing, BizOps for sales, and then teams underneath them. And then at Glassdoor, it is a little bit different. So this team, it's a stellar team. It's super smart people. But they work a bit more on cross-functional projects. So we'll have someone who's BizOps for all international. They own our international expansion strategy. Then they'll have BizOps for our jobs marketplace, and our jobs marketplace underlines it touches product, it touches marketing, it touches sales. But really no one else other than the BizOps teams could own these areas, because they're centralized, they're super, super smart, and they're really close to the executive teams. They can get things done.
If someone's looking to build out a BizOps and strategy team or BizOps and strategy function, do you have a couple of best practices or a mindset that they just need to nail these one or two or three things if they're going to build out that function and be really successful?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'd say a couple things. One, your BizOps, the person that you hire to lead your BizOps team, you want them to be a strategic thinker. They also need to be a strong people leader, and they need to be extremely data driven. But you want this to be someone who's going to show up in an executive room and is going to start preaching the gospel of data, and people are going to listen to. So you need someone who's going to be able to walk into that room and convince a skeptical executive team of the importance and the value of data. So that first hire is really important. And then also, as I mentioned, of course, they've got to be a really strategic thinker. This has got to be someone who sees the whole picture of the company and can play ball with executives at the most senior levels. And the reason they need to be a really strong people leader is the kind of people that you want to hire on a BizOps team. They're going to be super data driven, super strategic like their leader, and they're also going to be pretty intense. They're going to be people who are, they're really looking to build a career. They want to know what their next steps are. They've gotten, the A wasn't ever good enough for them. They got the A plus. And so enabling, you want someone who's going to enable the people that do both attract really strong talent and then manage them well. And managing people who are really high octane, really high output. Sometimes it's easy, you let them run, but they need a lot of support. They certainly need a lot of coaching. They're going to want a lot of guidance, that people who are going to seek out their manager for help. So having someone who's really strong people leader is incredibly important. And then I think in terms of, who you hire next, something that I found is really useful is I send a homework assignment. Again, maybe self-evident, But I think that this is something that obviously clean up your data, make sure that the data that you're sending out is not proprietary. I don't want anybody getting in trouble. So please, I'm not saying send out proprietary data. But what I do is I send out a data exercise that someone on my team did, again, scrubbed, can't say that enough, scrub that data. And then I ask them to both manipulate the data, but also to put together a presentation. And I do this actually pretty much across all levels. You learn so much from that. There are so many people that you'll say, oh, they've got a great background. But what you don't know, and I think one of the major flaws of interviewing and hiring in general, is you just really never know. You're just asking questions. You don't know how someone would do with the job, to actually do in the job. So send them a sample piece of work, see how they handle it. It'll tell you 90% of what you need to know.